sisters, welcome back to the Behavior Revolution Scriptures. My name's Mark, and Yahusha's renewed us for a season 2, and we've got some really exciting things that we're going to go into. Today is the Feast of Booths, Sukkot, the first day of the harvest, like the week of Sukkot. It's the first day. This is the day that Yahusha was born, the day that he came in the flesh and boothed among his people. And so are you out there hammering together your own little Sukkot and sitting under there? Or do you recognize that we are the booth of Elohim? We are the booth. We are the dwelling place, the tabernacle for his Ruach to reside in at this point. And of course, we are looking forward to the future when Yahusha will dwell in us fully, consummate his marriage. It's the wedding feast. That's what this day is, the wedding feast. And the New Jerusalem, and all that amazing things that we're looking forward to. That's where we have our hope and our expectation. So I hope you can grasp the reality in the 21st century context of what's going down. Just because you read instructions that Yahusha gave his people, go and hammer booths together and put twigs up and watch them die over the course of 7 days, and that represents your earthly body. And yeah, that's great. They're all shadows. They're wonderful. They teach us. They wash our minds out of the pagan filth and into Yahusha's instructions. But I think it's a little bit silly to be doing the exact same things when we understand the fulfillments of them. Yahusha's breathed life into his blood covenant, and through his own shed blood, obviously. Nothing was changed, and that's the whole purpose of me going through that whole book of Genesis, the last 21 episodes that we did, was to introduce you, if you weren't familiar, to the blood covenant. And we're going to go much more deeper into it in this next season. The whole concept of blood. As we know, Yahusha can't accept anything or anyone that's not covered in blood. Blood is very, very important to him. He can hear the frequency of it, remember? Blood cries out to him from the ground. His essence, his power, his cosmic being of who he is, and the DNA of his immortality is tied with blood. So that's why, in order to have any kind of relationship with him, even in the early days of Scripture, when the relationship was very minimal and not at all restored yet, after they left the garden, you couldn't have any kind of contact with them unless blood was involved. And we're going to go into that a lot more too. The other thing I want you to remember as we go forward is the whole purpose we're doing this is not some university degree where we're sitting here filling ourselves with knowledge so we can feel good about ourselves. The whole purpose of reading Scripture, and particularly reading it from this 21st century perspective, is if Yahusha was with us today, retelling these stories, teaching us, how would he say it? What would he be saying? The essence of his being and his character and his covenant does not change, and his instructions. However, the way he talked was back 2,000 years ago when he was in the flesh. He wouldn't be talking the same way today, because he would be as he walked among them. He was kind of incognito many times, unless he was standing up there doing something, and then he just blended in with the crowd again. He wasn't up there doing a grand scene most of the time. He was loving people, looking for where he needed to go, what he needed to do, who wanted him. And it's the same today. So it's all about the special relationship that he formed with his bride. And that's what these videos are about. This is what the Behavior Revolution translation is all about. Yahusha wanting to restore this planet to his covenant home again. It was all about a marriage covenant and a bride and a home. A wedding, a bride, a home. That's all he wanted in the beginning, and that's what he had. And it was good. He said it. It was good. And the Hebrew meaning of good is not what we say today. How are you? Good. It was good. It was the fullest form of amazing. It was good at its very core. In its essence, it was perfect. Good. He said it's good. And then it all got wrecked because of mankind's choices. So today we're going on down the path. Genesis introduced us to the blood covenant. Genesis introduced us to Yahusha's people, his chosen family, through Abraham, through Yitzhak, through Jacob, and then his 12 sons. And at the end of Genesis, we saw his 12 sons go into Egypt as he told Abram would happen, and he's going to draw them out with a mixed multitude and set them up as his chosen people, as an example to the earth of what life can be when I'm in your camp. So, but of course, before we do that, we have to lay the groundwork and see that where we left off, the most Messiah-ly type person that we read about was Yusuf. Falsely accused, sold into slavery, nobody, nothing, beaten, abused, falsely accused again. And then after a time, through his behavior, proving that Yahusha's behavior in him was real and effective, Yahusha raised him up in the Egyptian culture so that he could deliver his people through the famine. And that's where we're up to now. And then at the end of Genesis, Yusuf had died, most of his brothers died, and now we're left with what's going to happen in Egypt with the children of 𝗹𝕖𝕙𝕒𝕚. So that's where we're picking up today, guys, in this book of Exodus, or Shemoth. So we'll start. Let's go for it. Behavior Revolution Scriptures. We've changed the title page. We're talking about that's the parting of the waters, obviously, and the column of fire. Okay, we've got this similar page here. The whole purpose of these scriptures is to bring Yahusha's eternal blood covenant of deliverance to all generations in the 21st century. That's the whole purpose of these scriptures, from ancient Hebrew to everyday English. So if you haven't, I recommend you do. If you haven't watched season 1, which was Genesis, Bereshith, I recommend you do. But if you're picking up today with us and you haven't watched all those, that's what's different about these scriptures. They're colloquial, they're slang, they're everyday English. Some of it might be everyday Aussie English. If you're not Aussie, then, but we watch a lot of American TV shows too, so I'm quite up on American slang as well. So we're just the culture. I want it to sound every day, so it's not hard. You don't have to concentrate. You don't have to look up so many words and learn and study Hebrew. And it's wonderful to go back and do all those things, but we want to, once we've been there and learn it, we then have to express it in our everyday life, don't we? So we're bringing Yahusha's eternal blood covenant of deliverance to all generations in the 21st century, from ancient Hebrew to everyday English. Older people, younger people, newbies, veterans, everybody can understand these scriptures. Just like everybody can understand what Yahusha was saying, if he wanted them to. This is one of our favourite scriptures. And I hope you realise that the down and out, the drug addicts and the whores are becoming my bride before any of you religious vipers. Because I'm not here for those who think they're okay, but for those who know they're not. Yahusha didn't come for those who think they're okay. He came as the great physician, the healer, for those who were crying out for him, who were lost, who were downtrodden, who were broken. That's who he comes for. Us. I am Yahuwah. This is the burning bush that we're going to go into soon, guys. I'm above and beyond any imagination the people have of me. I'm not confined by who they think I am, and I won't be compared to their deities of wood and stone. Now go and tell them that Yahuwah has sent you. This is just a little excerpt of what he said to Musha. When I see the blood of the Lamb sealing your doorposts, I'll pass over you, so that judgment and death don't enter your house. For I am Yahuwah, your deliverance. That's a running theme of this book, deliverance, delivering his people from what they were in, delivering his people from slavery, deliverance. That's the theme of this book, a big theme, deliverance. Of course, they were delivered by his blood, the blood of the perfect Lamb. Another interesting topic we touch on in this book of Shemoth is the idea of appointed times, which is the Hebrew word is moedim. Appointed times, moedim. The ancient Hebrew symbols that make up the word moedim speak of passing through, which is what the word Hebrew means. Remember Abraham was called the first Hebrew, the first man who was brought into a blood covenant through the shedding of his own blood, the foreskin circumcision. He was called the first Hebrew, and Hebrew means passing through from one thing to another. And so this word 𝗻𝗻 speaks of passing through the waters that are held back to see the door of Yahusha's covenant. This is when you look at all the Hebrew symbols put together that make up the word 𝗻𝗻. One speaks about passing through, one speaks about the door, one speaks about waters. So when you put all this spiel together, listening to Yahusha's voice, this is the spiel. Passing through the waters that were held back to see the door of Yahusha's covenant house, forged in a fire of blood and water. This special marriage home, an interdimensional realm of which Yahusha is the door, was created for the loving relationship and protection of Yahusha's treasured first fruit bride on this earth, the garden in Eden. The garden which was lost, the tree of life which was lost. The whole purpose is the plan of restoration. And step by step, we saw in Genesis, we started with an altar, it started with shedding blood. Then it got from family member to family member, and then we got the 12 tribes. We introduced to the 12 tribes, and they've gone into slavery. Now he's going to bring them out, and he's going to teach them about his blood covenant, renew their minds, remind them, this is my covenant, this is who I am. I want you to be this in this relationship. Just as Yisrael passed through the waters on their way to the promised land and were taught how to approach their creator through the tabernacle, Yahusha's bridal people passed through the waters and appointed times as they prepare for the wedding feast and the restored covenant marriage home. Isn't it fitting that we start this chapter today on the first day of Booths? Because Booths is an appointed time, a 𝗻𝗻. It speaks to us of not only what they were instructed back in the early days of Scripture. It speaks to us about what Yahusha fulfilled and spoke about when he was on the earth. And it speaks to us about what he's going to do when he comes back. He hasn't technically, literally, fully fulfilled this feast yet of booths or atonement or trumpets, because he's going to do that when he comes back. But he's fulfilled it in the sense that he's put his ruach, a down payment of his ruach, in us as his dwelling place. He no longer booths among us in the flesh. We are the flesh that he booths in until he comes back in the flesh. He's coming back in the flesh, and he will also be in our flesh completely. Our flesh will be gone. We'll have bodies like him. The New Jerusalem will be made up of him and us, and it's all amazing. It's a big cube, but it's also made of us. How does that work? But it's going to work. So this day of booths is very exciting, guys, and this is where it all starts. He can't have a covenant home, a New Jerusalem, a marriage home, if he doesn't have a bride. The whole purpose was to find the bride. He had a bride, Adam and Kuah. They blew it. The first Adam failed. The second Adam did not fail. He delivered his people. And remember, we're talking types and shadows right now. The blood. Remember, we talked about blood covenant, all about blood and sacrifice and everything. Now we're bringing in some water in this series. The whole idea of cleansing, washing, being washed in the mind, washing, ceremonially washing, all that washing water. So bringing water in this series. All types and shadows, remember, about what he was going to do. Always remember that. Sometimes I get caught up in the literal, what he did back here, but always be remembering, as I'm trying to, about the fulfillments of these shadows. It's all exciting and amazing to talk about the shadows, but how does that relate to me today? You know? What does that mean to me today? And what does it mean in my future? That's how we should be, that's the context we should be filtering all this through. We should be filtering all this stuff we're learning through Yahusha himself, listening to Yahusha's voice, and he'll say, yeah, that was amazing then, but that was for them, not for you. And he'll say, yep, that's eternal. You keep doing that because it reminds you of this or that. You filter everything through the voice of Yahusha. You can't go wrong then. I believe I'm hearing Yahusha's voice when I do these things. I don't always hear Yahusha's voice in my day, stuff up things lots of times. But in this series, I feel an incredible anointing. And I know others have too, and so I'm pushing forward in it. Everything comes against you to stop you from doing it. So I don't believe anything I'm saying here is wrong, because I believe I'm hearing from Yahusha in this part of my life, and it's amazing. So that's the ●𝕬𝕚. That's why we do the ●𝕏𝕚, the appointed times. It's a dress rehearsal, you know, not the physical holding up cups and blowing trumpets, and that's just outward show and, you know, silliness after a while. What's going on within us, what Yahusha's doing with us, in us, to prepare us, like I spoke about last week, afflicting the flesh, controlling that thing that we're in, instead of it control what's in us controlling us, you know, that sort of thing. A reality in your day. It's got to be a reality in your day, not just head knowledge about what the Israelites went through when they left Egypt. And, you know, that's great to know. It's all types and shadows and learning for us, but how does it relate to us? It's got to be real, you know, sincere, truthful, what you're going through today, you know. That's how we've got to look at these things. So then we have the forward. I'm not going to go through all this forward for you. This is just to tell you that this is a 21st century translation, colloquial everyday English. Complete word for word overhaul. I've broken all the rules here, guys. All the scholars are trying to... That's going to keep flicking it. I've broken all the rules here, guys, because I want to do something fresh and original, using the ancient scriptures as my guide. But I want it to sound modern. So in other translations where people are like, you can't just switch words, take words out and add words in. I've done it, and I'm going to keep doing it. Not irresponsibly, not because I don't care. It's an incredible weight to take this seriously and think this is going to be the book that people use to learn about their deliverance. And I don't take that lightly. But I want it to sound light, not because the message is light, not because the covenant is light or flippant, but because the language is confusing. It's half Yoda, it's half Shakespeare, things back to front, because English language reads from, you know, this and that, and all the transitions and translations that have gone on. I'm using the BYNV as my base text. I'm reading a lot of English translations, and then I'm filling myself with, this is my process, then I'm filling myself with that, and then I'm just rewriting it. How I would talk, how you might talk, how to your children, to your spouse, how you would talk in everyday language, so people can grasp deliverance easily, all right? That's it. The men who wrote scriptures were not scholars, and neither are we. 21st century understanding. We're keeping the essence. Yashayahu, for with babbling lips and a foreign tongue, Yahusha speaks to this generation, saying, this is my rest. Give it to the weary. This is the refreshing. But they wouldn't listen. Who will listen? The English language is a babbling cocktail of sounds made up from the various languages that came before. It's also the most common form of communication on this planet, so let's communicate in it, guys. We're not Hebrew, and even those who say they're Hebrew don't understand the Paleo, original Hebrew. They're talking Babylonian jibber jabber Hebrew. So even those, the Jewish, the Yahudim, they're all talking in Babylonian modern Hebrew. So that doesn't help us either. You got to go back. Learn about it as much as you want, but once you learn the gems from the Hebrew language, bring it back and speak English so we can understand you, all right? That's the task I've been given to do. I love the English, the Hebrew language. I love looking up words that will enhance the experience and make it real. Then if I want to talk to someone else about it, spouse, children, whoever, you've got to have it in a nice package that makes sense, don't you? Because they may not feel the way you feel about it, and they don't want to go on the same journey you went on. Just tell us the answer, you know? Path. We're not going to go into that one. We're all on a path. The old paths are obedient behavior and have nothing to do with speaking or learning the Hebrew language. Okay? Over the years, those in the Hebrew roots movement have done an amazing job traveling back in time, so to speak, to unlock the mysteries of Scripture for us, revealing the key of knowledge, the power of deliverance and overcoming in the one and only true name of Yahusha, our deliverer. But the pathway is not a Hebrew path. Just because the language of the whole world used to be Hebrew, it's not a Hebrew path. Yahusha's deliverance is much more powerful than just one language. Yes, when he comes back, he might talk to us in Hebrew and we might understand and we'll all have the same language again, and that's fine. But that's not now, is it? We need to understand it. It's not fair that someone should have to labour through the English. It's not fair that someone should have to labour through the Hebrew language to find the gems of deliverance and then feel Yahusha inside them working. Make it easy. So, the one and only true name of Yahusha, our deliverer. The path is not a Hebrew path, for that was the culture back then. So now that we know how to look up words and find out their original meanings and have the capacity to travel back to the Hebrew, then what? This is the main point. The pathway of Yahusha's blood covenant spans for all time and all generations and is expressed through the correct context of behaviour in our modern everyday life and language. Our modern everyday life and language. Not because we want to be like the world, but we were born into the world. You don't have to come out of the, you have to come out of the worldly culture, but you don't have to come out of the national culture that you're in. Stay in your job, stay in your marriage, stay in the culture you're in, stay in everything, stay the same, and let Yahusha change you from the inside out, and everyone around you will start to be affected, hopefully in a good way. But you don't have to start cutting yourself like Yahusha does that. You're not the gardener. He's the gardener. He pulls out the secateurs and does the cutting in his time. You can't just do stuff of yourself because you've been told some mindset from some teacher. The fundamental essence and truth of the message is not altered or watered down. No way. Because even though the lifestyle, languages and customs have changed incredibly since the days of the scriptures, the pathway, behaviour, of loving obedience to Yahusha's instructions is a universal language in itself. Got that? Loving obedience to Yahusha's instructions is a language in itself. Universal language, which cannot be restricted to any time period. It's powerful and a light that shines just as bright today in Yahusha's bride, those who choose to behave it, as it did back in the early days of the earth. It wouldn't matter if you put believers back from the 1st century, 2nd century BC, brought them today, they'd be shocked by the world, but the behaviour should still be very similar when we look into each other's eyes, the sincerity, and we've all got the same instructions because Yahusha doesn't change. What about what conversations could we have with Noach, with Abraham, with Yusuf, with Musha? What conversations could we have with them? Knowing that what they've taught us through their writings, the things that they didn't get to see themselves because they died. Yahusha did this. He took what you wrote and he breathed life into it. We no longer have to do this bit and this bit and this bit because Yahusha not replaced it. No replacement theology, no law nailed to a cross or any of that BS. Nothing like that, but Yahusha breathed life. All that stuff you went through, Musha, all that stuff, Abraham, you with it. Yahusha breathed life into it. You were used in such an incredible way so that we can be so blessed. And everybody knows who Abraham is. Everybody in the world knows who Moses is, Musha. Imagine the conversation you could have with these people. And we could. It's the same essence, it's the same spirit because it was the spirit of Yahusha that was in them. And yes, he did fill people for a certain time. Not like he did after the day of Pentecost, after Shavuot, but he did fill people for certain purposes. And he could because his blood covered them. His blood has no beginning or end, remember? His blood sacrifice has no beginning or end. Wrap your mind around that. I mentioned this last week. His blood was sacrificed for you today. His broken body and blood was sacrificed for you today, just as it was 2,000 years ago on the torture stake. And that's how he began the process of deliverance as soon as Adam and Eve were kicked out of the garden. His blood was shed for them because his blood has no beginning or end. He's outside of time. He'd been impaled, he'd been beaten and bruised and sacrificed on that torture stake for Adam and Eve. It had not happened literally in time at that point, but he's outside time. So then all he had to do was get them to understand that. How am I going to get people to understand my blood sacrifice? I'll start teaching them about animal sacrifices. I'll start teaching them about the altar, how to communicate with me. And now we're in Exodus. I'm going to teach them a whole lot of things to wash their mind so that when I come along in the flesh and I am sacrificed, they will understand it. But did they? And even us, 2,000 years after that, do we understand it? Or have we been filled with religion too? In the midst of everyone rushing to get back to the Hebrew, we've got to get back to the Hebrew roots, understand Hebrew, we've got to know what's that mean in Hebrew, In the midst of everyone rushing to get back to the Hebrew, will anyone just speak English and make it easy for us? Why won't anyone just speak normal? Make it easy for us. We don't want to read your article that goes for 15 pages with 25,000 scriptures in it. You do the study if you feel led to do that. And then write us a paragraph about what you learned and tell us about it. We'd love to know. But we don't want to go on the same journey you went on. Life is so busy, Will anyone just speak English and make it easy for us? Behaviour Evolution says yes, we will. Why haven't I read that before? This is just a quick breakdown. I'll make it easy for you, I'll tell you. I've drawn on books like the book of Yahusha, apocryphal books, Yahusha and Jubilees and Enoch and books like that. Not in their entirety, because unless I decide to do them in the future, time word for word, or redo the whole books, only where the stories line up. So in this case, we're going to go into the life of Musha. So I looked at sections in Yahusha and Jubilees and places like that to see if they talk about Musha, and add more to the story, to expand the story and our understanding. Because I can. Yahusha told me to, so I can. You can't add stuff from that into the canon of scripture. I did. Stuff it. I did. Yahusha told me to, and I've done it to make the story more interesting. Stuff that we may not have known before. Stuff we weren't taught at Sunday school, Stuff that we weren't taught in religion. Just to enhance the text where the stories overlap. Like I did in Genesis. It was fascinating. They may not be those books don't fully deal with deliverance. They are a bit wacky, some of the stories and the details they go into. You can understand that the canon books are a bit more leading a person towards deliverance. That's why I'm not focusing purely on the apocryphal books, because they're not really based on deliverance. They're just interesting stories by other people who may or may not have been inspired. But Musha draws on those books and says, well, he talks about them. So if they're inspired enough or truthful enough, historical enough in their evidence for Musha and other people to use them, so can we. Because I'm very conscious of the fact that this translation is all about deliverance. If a story is not teaching us about the blood covenant and deliverance and what Yahusha did, then we haven't understood it, because everything in scripture is pointing towards that and our behaviour. So it doesn't look like it's talking about that. Read it some more and listen to Yahusha, and he'll say to you, yeah, that's why. Surely by now Yahusha's bride can see that her bridegroom only seeks those who will worship him in spirit and truth. And it all comes down to behaviour. These scriptures use the name of Yahusha from beginning to end. That's another big thing. If you haven't been watching, if you haven't been going on this journey with us through Genesis, that's another big thing. I'm using the name, above all names, Yahusha, because even in the old or early scriptures, it was still Yahusha. He had not come in the flesh yet, and they only knew him as Yahuwah, El Shaddai, the Elohim of the mountain, Almighty Yahuwah. That's the name he revealed to them. But we know now, looking back, that was Yahusha. Yahuwah and Yahusha are the same. The Father and the Son are one. So I've made it easy. If somebody's in the narrative, when the narrative says Yahusha spoke to Musha, I've used the word Yahusha, the name of Yahusha. When men and women are talking, I use whatever they would have used at the time. Because I just want to make it easy for young people, old people to know that there's not 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 beings. There's not a trinity or quadrinity or all this madness. It's one being. And he appeared at different times as different people. 𝗪𝗔𝗪𝒃 he appeared as. Well, that was Yahusha. Anytime there's an epiphany or like he wrestled with Jacob. That would have been Yahusha. You've got to be in the flesh to wrestle with somebody, don't you? So how did he do that? Because he can do anything, you know. Or when he appeared to them and told them, you know, about Sodom and Gomorrah 10 times, 15 people, 12 people. How many people? You know, remember that? That was Yahusha, because he was talking to him. It's all Yahusha, guys. And the reason we know that too is because if you look at certain Hebrew manuscripts or versions, the Aleph Tor, the Hebrew symbols, the Aleph Tor, which are Yahusha's secret identity, are all through the early scriptures as well. Even before he showed up on the scene in the flesh, the Aleph Tor is right through there. Right in the middle of which we're going to go through, as Musha being born, the Aleph Tor is just firing off everywhere in the text, which you're not going to see because I'm not showing you Hebrew texts, unless I specifically need to, but you take my word for it and you can look it up yourself if you want. The Aleph Tor is right through all the old, we don't like that word, but the early scriptures. The early scriptures, the Aleph Tor is everywhere, which means it's Yahusha talking. It's Yahusha's deliverance plan. The minute Adam and Kuah got out of the garden, Yahusha was in deliverance mode. And that's what Yahusha means. Yahuwah is my deliverance. So you're not being sacrilegious or breaking a commandment or casting down the name of Yahuwah to ruin by not using the name of Yahuwah, because by using the name Yahusha, you are using the name Yahuwah, because Yahusha means Yahuwah plus deliverance. And we're using the name Yahuwah anyway here as well. So Yahuwah and Yahusha are the one and the same being. The Creator told us that his name Yahuwah is for all generations. Yahusha the Son came in his father's name Yahu. I was, I am, I will be. The only difference between their two names is the added symbols for deliverance. Shah. So the name of Yahusha is a complete revelation of who the Creator of the universe really is. A complete revelation. Many people have not known this until recently. It was Yahusha who orchestrated each encounter and conversation throughout all the scriptures to wake up, deliver, and restore his bridal people to blood covenant marriage once again. It's all Yahusha. So, this Behavior Revolution translation uses the name of our Messiah Yahusha for all narrative purposes. However, prior to Yahusha's physical birth, when individuals are speaking or talking, the name of the Father is used because that was the extent of their understanding of who he was at that time. Why would anyone who's been grafted into Yahusha's bride, Yisrael, through immersion and tasted the sweet redemptive power of Yahusha's blood, ever want to call on any other name than Yahuwah is my deliverance, which is Yahusha? Are you ready to be refreshed? And we've just got a table of contents of this book of Exodus. So here we go, guys. Shemoth. Exodus means, you know, getting out of something, running for your lives, buggering off. That's Exodus. But the actual Hebrew word for this book that Moshe wrote, his second manuscript, his second scroll, was called Shemoth. And Shemoth means names. And an interesting thing I didn't realize too is Moshe often called the books by the first sentence, the first line or sentence of the book. So like in Genesis or Bereshith, it was in the beginning. That's what Bereshith means, in the beginning. So he called them the way he started them almost. Like when you save a file, sometimes it just, if you don't put a name in, it saves it by the first few letters you wrote. You know, dear such and such. So the computer calls your document dear such and such. Well, here, Moshe's just called the names of the books by what he first wrote. So in Genesis, it was in the beginning, which is what Bereshith means. And here, the first sentence is, these are the names of the children of Yisrael who came to Egypt with their father Jacob. So these are the names. That's what Shemoth means, the names. And I'll put that in a picture here for you. But you can see there's the 12 sons of Jacob who went to Egypt with their father Jacob. Then we have this fabulous photo here. Best artistic interpretation I've ever seen. Look at it. You've got the Red Sea parting and the rainbow. Look at the rainbow. And you've got the fire from the burning bush, and that's how Yahusha appeared too. You've got fire on one side. That's how he appeared at night, and the pillar of cloud on the other side. And if you look closely in there, you can see Musha up on the mountain. So I love that artist rendition of the story. Here we come. Series 2, Book 2, Scroll 2, Manuscript 2, whatever you want to call it. This is the second book of Musha. Exodus, Shemoth, deliverance through blood and water. That's the theme of this, deliverance through blood and water. Even before we talk about obedience, this is a big thing too that I want to push through. This is before the 10 instructions, the eternal blood covenant was refreshed, reminded, renewed. Even before that was brought up, even before they even had a chance to be obedient or disobedient, to sacrifice or not sacrifice, to be covered in blood, even before all that happened, he delivered them in their wicked, pagan, not sinful, don't like that word, evil is a better word, evil state, wicked state, unlawful, lawlessness. Even before we were still in that state, Yahusha delivered us through nothing we could do. He chose us, brought us back, and delivered us. So remember that as we go through these stories. They were not delivered, as important as obedience is to the instructions, they were not delivered through their obedience. Yeah? They were delivered before that. And then those who chose to be obedient and keep going ended up entering the covenant home. So there's different levels, guys. We can't buy our deliverance through our obedience. We are obedient because we love him and we want to please him. Don't you just love Yahusha? Look at what he's brought you out of. Look at the world around you and how it's just on a slippery slope to destruction. Can't you see your deliverance is the sweetest, amazing, most powerful thing in your life? Why would you want to step out of that? You know? So this whole thing, are we saved by grace, and all this rubbish the Christians go on with, you know, it's not about that at all. You can't buy your deliverance. But you can either be a part of the kingdom through default because you are delivered by the blood, but you might miss, we're going to go into this too, you might miss the first resurrection, you know, because you didn't behave yourself. You know, you weren't a spotless bride. He can't be connected with anybody. He can't be unequally yoked. He can't be connected, and he's perfect. So we have to be perfect too. Oh, no one's perfect. Well, you ain't going to make it then if you're not. Through his power, through his blood, we are perfected, and by the time he comes back, we will be perfect. You know? Yes, we are never perfect in our flesh, but the last little bit happens when our flesh leaves. Yeah? Our process of redemption, our process of perfection, we start with nothing and we start exercising his ruach inside us, the down payment of his ruach, so that in his time, as he leads us and trains us and flogs us and disciplines us and prunes us, and he's on this path, we're on this path of deliverance, he's preparing us so that right before he comes back, we'll be this close to being perfect. And when he comes back, he will completely perfect us, throw off our flesh, transform us, you know? Fascinating to think about. We've gone to 40 minutes and I haven't even started the scriptures yet. Oh my goodness. This is the introduction, guys, anyway. So we'll just do the quick recap and then we'll get into it. We'll do the first page, guys, and you can tune in when we keep going. So Exodus, delivered through blood and water. Here's a quick recap. Through the life of Yusuf, we saw the character traits of Messiah Yahusha himself. Born into the covenant bloodline, stripped of his power, falsely accused, a suffering servant who never complained and was left for dead to his family, and resurrected to the heights of power to deliver the world. Can you see that's almost mirror image of what Yahusha did? Born into the covenant bloodline, so was Yusuf, so was Yahusha. Stripped of his power, yep. They wanted a big powerful king to conquer the Romans. No, they got a humble servant. He was falsely accused, a suffering servant who never complained and was left for dead. Well, Yahusha was dead. Yusuf was left for dead, and his family thought he was dead. It was symbolic of death. And resurrected to the heights of power to deliver the world. His bereaved father, Jacob, who had always struggled and fought for every step of his belief, was devastated and lost, beyond being comforted, until the news of his son's resurrection reignited his spirits again, and he became the mighty 𝗍𝗍𝗪. And I believe that's why they keep interchanging his name from Jacob to 𝗍𝗍𝗪 in the text, because he had many ups and downs. As soon as his son, apparently, figuratively came back to life, to him, his spirits were just reignited. He became the mighty 𝗍𝗍𝗪, filled with covenant hope and returning to his pathway of promises. Yusuf's life indeed foreshadowed our Messiah's, and the origins of the eternal blood covenant lay a firm foundation to build Yahusha's perfect covenant house for his first fruit bride. What was that again? Yusuf's life indeed foreshadowed our Messiah's, yes, and the origins of the eternal blood covenant lay a firm foundation. That's what Genesis was about, laying the foundation of what the blood covenant was. There's not lots of different blood covenants, guys. There's not the Edenic and Adamic and Mosaic and Davidic and Palestinian and all these covenants. There's only one covenant, one eternal blood covenant. And it got renewed with different generations and tweaked here and there, not because it was something wrong with it, but to relate to a new generation, And because Yahusha was gradually restoring things and breathing life into it step by step until he came, bang, and renewed it in his blood. No more animal sacrifice. Not because animal sacrifices, nothing's abolished. Circumcision is not abolished. Circumcision is just on our heart now. Animal sacrifice hasn't been abolished. Yahusha's sacrificed every single day for us still, remember? Outside of time. Nothing is abolished. Nothing he did from the beginning, there's anything wrong with it. It's perfect. But the behavior transforms because he breathes life into it. And why would you do the old shadows when you can come into the renewed understanding of it? So the eternal blood covenant lay a firm foundation to build Yahusha's perfect covenant house for his first fruit bride. Once lost through disobedience in the garden, Abraham was Yahusha's friend. Yitzhak was willing to be sacrificed as the only son of the blood covenant. And Jacob wrestled with Yahusha his whole life, and in the end, he overcame. Shemoth, meaning names, sees a new shift in Yahusha's redemptive plan. New shift, something new is happening here. Just as he grafted Yusuf, a clean, circumcised covenant son, into a pagan, sun-worshipping, idolatrous society to live, speak, intermarry, and lead his chosen people into Egypt, we will now see Yahusha graft another clean, circumcised covenant son into this same wicked society to deliver his chosen people and lead them back out to the land he promised to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob. But as with all of his bride, coming out from an idolatrous system of slavery, they had to be trained and tested and taken into the wilderness, separated and severed from all ties, to have their eyes firmly placed on Yahusha, who will work and reason with her so that her behavior will be that of pure gold, shining. So can you see, just as Yusuf, a circumcised Hebrew covenant man, was grafted into, taken into Egypt, and he was used to bring all the 12 tribes of Israel into Egypt. Now in this book, Exodus, Shemoth, we're going to see another covenant son raised up to lead them back out again. Yeah? It's very exciting where we're going, guys. This book that Moshe wrote is like a 5-part story. Yes, it goes with the other 66 books of deliverance, but this book itself doesn't really, only that it would be a huge task not to. It doesn't even need to be divided up into Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It's all one story of deliverance. It's like the foundational shadow package that we look at and go, okay, this is what happens. But of course we have to look at it and go, what does that mean to us today through Yahusha's final sacrifice of his blood? So very exciting where we're going, guys. And everything that we learned in Genesis, we're going to be building on in this chapter, and we're going to go, oh, that's why Yahusha told Abraham this. That's why he made this promise to Abraham. That's why Moshe had to do this, because of the That's why, because of the circumcision, because of the blood covenant. Because it's all going to go click, 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 click. But if you're too busy trying to change words in your head and translate words in your head, you miss the big picture because you're staring this close at the text, going, what does that word mean? And what does that word mean? And what does that mean? And you never get a chance to sit back and see the story of deliverance, see the shadow for what it really is. So that's why I would rather do all the hard work here, go back to the Hebrew for you. I mean, it's the other people who've really done the Hebrew work. I don't speak Hebrew or know much about it. I just glean from their work. And then bring it back into a nice package for you and say, let's talk normally and read it so you understand. So whereas you might get other qualities out of other translations in a smaller scale and get nuances and gems out of the text, I want you to get a bigger picture here of the text in your life and what it means to you in sincerity. Their thoughts. They're not even conscious what flows in and out of their vessel on a daily basis. So you taking what they say personally and getting into arguments and fighting and challenging and trying to change people and do all this, let them have it, man. If you should put someone in front of you that needs your love and concern and attention, that's great. If not, just let them all. They're walking dead out there. Just put your head down, your bum up, live your quiet life, mind your business, stay out of the affairs of this life. That's so boring. And look to Yahusha, what he's doing. He's put the dimensions together inside you because you're the living dwelling of his essence. So that, therefore, if his essence is in us, the dimensions must be aligned inside us a little bit. And the more you overcome, the more you get to feel and see and hear his voice. So keep going, brothers and sisters. And I'll be back with episode 2 very soon. Love you. Bye-bye.